The Baltimore Ravens suffer an inexcusable and absolutely disgusting loss to the Las Vegas Raiders in week 2. We talk about what went wrong, John Harbaugh's seat warming up, and a lot more coming up on this post-game instant reaction live edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in today, even after a loss, and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every day, free and available for you all podcasting platforms. Video form on YouTube, you can like and subscribe. Audio form, you can follow along, subscribe over there as well. Today's post-game edition of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by LinkedIn. And LinkedIn has so much that they have to offer here, but you can go to LinkedIn right now, and LinkedIn jobs help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. I honestly have a lot of words. I think we all have a lot of words, and that's what we're here for. The Ravens suffer, again, just an absolutely disgusting loss to the Las Vegas Raiders. 26-23, the Raiders win on not necessarily a time-expiring field goal, but one that iced the game. Historic collapse, inexcusable collapse, just every single aspect had areas where you're just like, man, what's going on? But of course, I think it all kind of circles back to John Harbaugh and his management of the clock, his management of his challenges. It's a lot of words that we're going to talk about today, particularly surrounding John Harbaugh. But look, there were just inexcusable plays everywhere, sloppiness everywhere. And again, if you're in the chat with this live, please post your grievances, air them out. I'll try to get to as many as I can. I think it's important for us to all just kind of talk through this and make sure that, you know, we all can kind of say how we're feeling. I certainly am feeling a lot of different ways right now. So let's just start off with really the end of the game, which I thought was one of the, honestly, might have been the worst executed and managed games we've seen in the John Harbaugh era, and that's going back a while. Definitely, I feel like in the Lamar Jackson era. But just like thing after thing after thing. I'm not placing the blame all on one guy, but I think there are varying levels of blame that we can go about here. And this team starts 0-2 for the first time since 2015. And as I mentioned, only one team last season made the playoffs after starting 0-2, and that was the Houston Texans, and there were plenty of them. But you see the end of the game where the Ravens, and the CBS broadcast even called the Ravens out on this. I was tweeting about it. Other people were talking about it too. This team refuses to play to their strengths. I thought we had seen it. I thought we had finally gotten it. Derrick Henry late in that game was starting to cook. He was starting to do his thing. And yes, he had a couple of false starts that really killed some of the Ravens' momentum here. But it's like their offense right now, I'll pull up the box score stats quickly so we can look, because in the first half, it was their passing offense was throw the ball to Zay Flowers and then repeat step one with maybe a sprinkle of Mark Andrews in there. But for the Ravens, they need to lean into Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson more. They do. And I thought they did a good job-ish later in the game, and I thought we had finally had that breakthrough of, oh, do the Ravens really know how to utilize Derrick Henry? Do the Ravens really know how to use this guy they signed? Because, again, in the age of paying running backs, you don't bring in a guy for $8 million a season if you're not going to use him. And I thought, all right, well, we're finally getting it. Henry's starting to churn, and the Ravens are finally starting to find it. Then late in the game, they abandoned it a little bit, and part of it is because of the offensive line. You know, we'll talk about the execution with John Harbaugh and what he did. We'll get into that more as this segment goes into the second segment. But, man, let me tell you, this Ravens team mismanaged their offensive line in a historic way this offseason. One that, honestly, you know, it's my job to sit up here and talk about words and have words for it. I don't. I've been talking about it. If you've been an everydayer here on Locked On Ravens, and again, appreciate your support if you have. But if you've been an everydayer, you have heard me talk about how 3 vets is a lot to lose for a contending team. They didn't go out there and get any other vets to replace those guys. They decided to go young with guys that were on their roster. They're playing guys out of position. They're using a rotation, which I am vehemently against, and I think a lot of other people are too. I mean, Roger Rosengarten comes in and stonewalls Max Crosby on a lot of plays after McCary struggled with him. And then McCary gets to go back in the game. What message does that tell your rookie? Hey, you did a great job on one of the best pass rushers in the league, but go sit down for a few series. We're going to put this other guy back in. You got to abandon the rotation. Roger Rosengarten earned my respect and earned that starting job. Daniel Falele should not see the field again as a guard. Put Ben Cleveland in there. It's time for the Daniel Falele experiment to end. It's over. It's done. The fact that the contending team did it in the way that they did, it's pretty wild, if we're being honest. We see that stuff for non-contending teams that are trying to work something out, that maybe they see a gem at the guard position and maybe a guy has the traits, and you experiment with that over the course of the season. The Ravens do not have that time. You got to go. You got to go with the floor, Ben Cleveland, even just in the running game. The Ravens averaged 5.6 yards per carry in this game. It wasn't like they were terrible on the ground. But I felt like when they found it and when they were going with it, they didn't find a way. And that is, the philosophy with John Harbaugh has been those rotations. And I'm trying to keep up on social media to look at John Harbaugh's press conference just to give us more context into everything that he's saying here. But some of these decisions are just mind-boggling, and at this point are kind of normal. The biggest set of decisions, 2 plays by Las Vegas that if you were watching the broadcast, if you went to the game, wherever you were, you could clearly see that those plays went in the Raiders' favor, and there wasn't any really debate about it. Where that first one was pretty egregious. Zay Flowers, that ball clearly hits the turf, bounces back up into his arms. And I know, Zay's calling for the catch. He's saying no challenge, trying to get the challenge. But you can't be baited into that. You can't do it. Your replay officials, you yourself, and I know, Harbaugh has people in his ear, this, that, but there has to be, and it even seemed like Lamar was kind of like, what? Hold on, what, whoa. And then the second one, Devontae Adams, clearly possession, 2 feet in bounds, and you lose your second challenge. Now, again, the new rule is that you now have the opportunity to challenge 2 plays. You get 1 right, and you get your challenge. You get your second challenge for a third. John Harbaugh goes 0 for 2 on his challenges. And guess what? Oh, it's not like the Ravens needed a timeout or anything, right? Not like there was a big late game situation where the Raiders are running down the clock to try to get as much time off and kick the game-winning field goal. There was nothing like that happened, right? We all saw no. The Ravens needed that timeout. It was imperative they had it. And when they needed it most, they didn't have it because John Harbaugh's out there challenging plays and his replay staff is looking at plays and telling them to challenge that are so clear and obviously not plays you challenge. That are so clear and obviously things that, even if you're not entirely 100% sure, it's just you have to look and be more situationally aware. And this would be different for John Harbaugh and for this Ravens team, right? We've seen losses like this. What happens? The Ravens play down to competition. I talked about it all this past week on Locked On Ravens. If you listen to our pregame episodes and everything, I did a game day episode earlier today, and I was kind of like, look, we've seen this story before for the Ravens. They have played down to competition. Are the Raiders a better team than the Ravens are? No. Do the Ravens have a better roster? Or do the Raiders, have a better roster than the Ravens do? No. But it comes down to being situationally aware, mistakes. Obviously, the referees did have an impact on this game, which we'll get to. But as I said after week 1, I'm not in the business of blaming the refs and using that as the full excuse as to, why'd the Ravens lose? It was the refs. We can say they've made an impact, but I want to take this from a whole perspective, and say that the Ravens managed this game poorly. They had plenty of situations in this game where they could have capitalized, and the Raiders took advantage more than the Ravens did. And it kind of felt like in that fourth quarter, the Ravens are up 10. The Raiders had 49 straight games where they were trailing by 10 or more in the fourth quarter, and they hadn't won a game. Well, guess what? I guess number 50 is the charm because the Ravens gave the Raiders their first win in 50 attempts on that. And so it's all just stuff where we look at this team, we look at the expectations of a team. In this Ravens team, what was the expectation coming into the season? It's a Super Bowl roster. They have the pieces. Let's go out there and see if they can do it. They need a fast start. Getting week 1 in Kansas City, that's always a tough draw, right? But you got to go out there and do your job. You felt really good. Well, I guess not really good, but you felt like, okay, there are some things they can work on after that loss. But I said it leading up to this game as well. it would feel like a pretty bad win if the Ravens snuck out of this one with, like a 3-point win. Well, guess what? They actually lost the game and they drop to 0-2. So for a team with Super Bowl aspirations, for a team that, has a superstar quarterback with superstar defenders, there are so many questions. And is there enough time for answers? Is there enough time for answers? Because guess what? I hate to break it to you. And I hate to break it to myself too. I kind of looked at the schedule. Guess what the Ravens' next 3 games are? If you know, you know. But it is at the Cowboys, versus the Bills, at the Bengals. That's a heck of a stretch. In a situation now with the Ravens 0-2, you are potentially staring a 1-4 start down. Are you staring a 2-3 start down? Can you win all those 3 games and get to 3-2? They have a tough road ahead. And they have to figure it out fast. Lamar Jackson now saying, they got to find their mojo. That's not us at all. It's tough because we've seen games like this happen before. Gardner Minshew last year, the Ravens mistakes down the line from that Ravens team, and they lose, and that's what it is. And Skyhawk, I hear you on this point. Maybe the Ravens are trying some stuff early in the season. I hear what you're saying, and I've actually brought that up on shows before, but they can't do it. They need to find who they are, but without maybe experimenting as much as they are. I think that's the frustrating part for a lot of people is this team with aspirations like they had. This is the most disappointing start you could have. They were obviously a toe away from winning that game potentially in Kansas City, but the late game execution, the Ravens go 3-and-out after the Raiders tie the game. Right? Obviously, a lot of that had to do with some penalties, then a poor Jordan Stout punt, then a penalty on that play where a guy goes out of bounds, and then the Raiders just walk you down. They walk you down. Zamir White, who hadn't been doing anything all game, not all game, the Raiders struggled stats-wise. The Raiders, 1.6 yards per carry in this game for the Raiders. 1.6. They held Alexander Madison 4 carries, 1 yard. Amir Abdullah, 2 for 1. But when the game was on the line and it mattered, the Raiders walked them down. And the Ravens held on 3rd down. They gave the offense some level of an opportunity to get the job done. But guess what? The offense would have had a heck of a lot more of an opportunity if they had that timeout so they could save 40 seconds. That's the reality of the situation. So coming up in the second part of the show, we'll keep getting into what's going on with this Ravens team, what needs to change, John Harbaugh, more mistakes. We'll try to get to some positives as well, but I know it's not a very positive loss whatsoever for this Ravens team. Stay tuned. So much to get to, and I mean so much to get to on this live edition, instant reaction post-game show of Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools that find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And for me, I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn. Whether it's finding jobs, networking, connecting, LinkedIn has it all. And LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job. You might be open to searching for the perfect role in a given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And the show is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, and I love going on FanDuel, seeing all they have to offer. We have something a little different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5. Get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel anytime. So if you had the Raiders in this game, congratulations to you. You probably won over on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com. Download America's #1 sportsbook. We've returned here, Locked On Ravens, a disappointing and disgusting loss of the Las Vegas Raiders in Week 2 to drop the Ravens to 0-2 for the first time since 2015. Kevin Ostreicher, your host, still here with you, venting, getting it all out. Is the Ravens just, how disappointing was this? And this is probably some of the more passionate, fiery speeches I've given on this show, and, some of the more emotional in terms of just passion. Because it's frustrating. It's frustrating for all of us. I feel what you are feeling, right? We go through this together, and that's what these post-game reactions are. In the wins, we celebrate. In the losses, we vent. So appreciate everybody for tuning in after a loss. We're going to be back here tomorrow, obviously, with much more content, mainly surrounding John Harbaugh and having a real conversation about this team. But guess what? We're having real conversations right now, too, about just this team and what needs to change, what needs to happen. And Mike, shout out to you, man. Appreciate you checking in. Say, not keeping McDonald will haunt us. Mark my words. Let's go to Seattle for a second. Let's go to Seattle. Because guess what? Mike McDonald and the Seattle Seahawks are 2-0. John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens are 0-2. I know there were a lot of people who wanted the Mike McDonald succession plan. I mean, that's just, it's tough. Because right now, John Harbaugh's seat is certainly getting warm, if it wasn't already. It's heating up. And we know that this Ravens team has flaws. No team is perfect. But a lot of this, it falls back on the coach. It falls back on the challenges. It falls back on some of the management in this game for John Harbaugh. And Mike McDonald is absolutely killing it over in Seattle. So, I mean, yeah. I mean, congratulations to Mike, but obviously it kind of stings here in Baltimore. I see Crawley saying Lamar better start blocking out there. Man, put him at guard. Put him at guard. Have Linderbaum hand the ball off to Lamar at right guard, and he'll jump back and do it himself. It's better than what they've got going on right now. The offensive line, and Crawley, I appreciate you bringing this up because I want to dive a little more into it. Some of the stuff we talked about before the season, but with Falele in particular, he just can't get to his spots quickly enough. The Ravens are trying to run these outside tosses, outside zones. And in order to do that, you need to have guys that can pull. You need to have guys that can get to their spot, cut off the defender in the hole, and make sure that there is a hole for the runner to go. And we saw in multiple plays today. We saw it last week. Daniel Falele, Spencer Schultz, who's a friend of the show here, calls him, he's a plotting guard. He cannot get to his spots quickly enough. And if you can't get to that spot and seal off that defender, they have a free shot at him. And if the Ravens want to be that outside team, they want to get to their spots, you need to get guys in there that can pull. Falele is a huge guy. You know, when the hand placement is there, usually it sticks. But there are too many miscommunications, particularly on that stunt, right? The Ravens trying to go down, win the game. They're trying to go down and win the game. And Max Crosby does a stunt. Daniel Falele just doesn't see him. Reacts way too late, and Lamar gets crunched. I mean, you have to start Ben Cleveland at this point. I'm not saying he's the savior of this offensive line, but he has to be at least better than what they have right now. And that's the frustrating part, is because they don't really have, and this is the thing with offensive line. Again, if you were listening to me in the offseason, I made this point a lot, but you have to figure out your offensive line in the offseason. The Ravens committed to this plan, and now they're going through with what they asked for. This is what it is, where you can't really necessarily rebuild an offensive line during the season, because guess what? Everybody needs offensive linemen. This is not just the Ravens. Every team needs them. That's why they're so expensive in free agency. That's why they're so expensive at the trade deadline. You know, that's what it is. That's what it is. And Changes, appreciate you bringing this up. And if these are I trust you on this one. You're probably better at math than I am anyway. But 2 games, 18 penalties for 174 yards. So Changes with the stats on the penalties. Appreciate you bringing this up. It's a problem along with the right side of the offensive line, bad head coaching. Undisciplined football. And look, was every penalty a penalty or the correct call? No. This was one of the worst officiating crews I've ever seen. And we're saying that after the week 1 game against Kansas City with all those legal formation penalties. But this is a really good point here by Changes, because you can't keep doing that. I think that a couple of the calls were fine, but a couple were egregious. I get that the David Ajabo penalty, or I guess the non-call, would have probably just been the penalty instead of the Nnamdi Madubuike face mask, but then call the correct penalty. Don't tell me it was a face mask when he gets him up on the shoulder. I mean, don't tell me that's the play. Don't tell me that's the penalty. Brandon Stevens and Devontae Adams, hand fighting. I guess Stevens got a little grip on the shoulder, but both those guys are making plays. They called a play, and that was a huge penalty, obviously, to put the Raiders down at the 1-yard line. And then you have other things as well. I mean, there's just this time and time again. You have there are so many things going on. I can't even remember everything that happened. But it all accumulated into one of the worst losses in the John Harbaugh era. And I'll say it again. September losses don't matter in September, but they sure do matter in December. The Ravens can turn their season around. They can get back into win column. They can do their thing. But come December, whether it's for the AFC North, for seeding, for playoffs, for wild card, I mean, mark my words here. I would assume we go and we look back on these two losses in week 1 and 2, and it will be the situation. And yes, I agree. The officiating was horrendous, just awful officiating. But we can't sit up here and just blame it all on the officials, right? We can't sit up here and blame it on the officials. We have to look the problem in the face. And it is this team was not prepared to start the season. This team has a bunch of rust. This team has huge issues, huge holes in their game management, especially in this game. I can't believe John Harbaugh challenged both those plays. I keep coming back to it. I keep coming back to it. So let's do a game in the chat. This is what we do sometimes for all the shows I'm a part of. But let's play a little game, not a fun one, but let's do it. Panic meter, scale of 1 to 10. And I'll give mine. So if you're listening to this back or in audio form, you can obviously, you can tweet at me, you can Instagram message me, you can put it in the comments. Panic meter 1 to 10. 1, you're not panicked. 10, you're extremely panicked. What is your level of panic for the Ravens right now? They start 0-2. They have a tough stretch ahead. If I had to give mine, I'd probably go 7. There's time for them, but there are huge issues. And if those issues are not solved, if this is a team that's staring down a 1-4 start, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. So I'll go 7. I think they have enough talent to turn it around. I'm not saying the season's over, but it's frustrating right now, right? It is. And this is part of it here. Zeus saying, let's run a draw on 2nd and 20 and then throw a 3-yard flat on 3rd down. It's some of those decisions. I think that Todd Monken has been not good over these first 2 games. And this is exactly what we were talking about last season, man. If you were with me all last season, you heard my post games then. We've been through this before where we all thought, okay, well, it's year 2 of Todd Monken's offense. They're going to have to start faster. They're going to have to do all this. Well, guess what? What was the thing we talked about all last season for this Ravens offense, or at least the majority, not all last season. I won't sell them that short, but the majority of the offense for last year. It was, well, they either start really fast and then fall off a cliff, or they start really slow and they kind of find it later in the game. We've seen one of each. Where obviously they started fast in that Kansas City game, 7-0, Derrick Henry, 5 carries. Then it just kind of goes downhill from there for a little bit. In this game, I mean, technically, I don't have the score by quarter in front of. Wait, yes, I do. Hold on. Yes, I do. The Ravens 3-0. It was 9-6 at halftime. Again, not math, not my strong suit. But then we started to see, like, okay, the Ravens are using the run game a little bit more. They're using Derrick Henry a little bit more, right? Let's just see if they can do that. And then penalties, poor calls, miscommunications, everything boiling down to horrendous fourth quarter management and just execution from this team. So John Harbaugh was asked about making changes up front on the offensive line. John Harbaugh said they'll watch the tape and continue to play the best players. It's not even true. It's not even true because you know why? They're running a rotation. So even if Harbaugh says, yeah, we're going to play the best players every week, they're not. Why? Because one has to be better than the other, whether you think it's McCary or Rosengarten, whether you think it's one of those two. And guess what? If you're running a rotation, you're putting in the worst guy for the better guy, regardless of who it is. You have to stop with the rotation. You have to do it. I will plead up here on this show and make that point forever. I've been so against it, and they need to stop with the rotation. Put Rosengarten in. I see, Frank, I hear you. 23-13 in the fourth quarter. You can't get the job done. Inexcusable stuff from the Ravens in this game. And I see a couple of people saying that Lamar was not the problem. I agree. I don't think Lamar was the problem. Even if you want to blame his interception on him, which I'm not, that ball hit Bateman in the hands. So not on Lamar Jackson. But what would you blame him for? He was running for his life. In this game, if you want to go the pure box score stats, 21 of 34 for 247, the one touchdown. He had 5 for 45. This loss is not on Lamar. And anybody that says that, I regret to inform you, you are wrong. But coming up in the final part of the show, we're going to be continuing to events about this game. We're going to get more into what's next for the Ravens, how they can right the ship after their 0-2 start. So be sure to stay tuned. We have a lot of words still to say here on this live instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch their winnings roll in. So for Caleb Williams, 1 Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss the deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. Plus, PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. So over on PrizePicks, man, if you went with the Isaiah Likely more on receiving yards, that was something to look good before the game, but maybe not so as it was playing out. Zay Flowers more receiving yards as well, although he was kind of the entire Ravens passing offense today. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. Let's go to LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. We return our final segment, Locked On Ravens here. Disappointing Sunday. The Ravens lose 26-23 to the Las Vegas Raiders, start 0-2, and just pure disaster for this team. The worst start you could have imagined. You were feeling somewhat fine after that Kansas City loss. Felt like there was some stuff that they could hone in on. Then they just kind of all throw it down the drain against Las Vegas in week 2. So if you're new to the channel, hopefully you're enjoying the content, even though it was not an enjoyable game. Hopefully you stay a while. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube, and plus follow along in audio form. We do 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. So we'll be right back here tomorrow, 6 a.m. Eastern time, talking about this Ravens loss. And again, having a real conversation, looking in the mirror with John Harbaugh. I see Lucas asking, where's Mark Andrews been these first 2 games? Yeah, it's been a bit disappointing. Andrews got going a little bit late in this game, 4 for 51 for Mark Andrews. But, hasn't really been able to break open. Lamar's under pressure. It's been a disappointing start, Lucas, for Mark Andrews. I 100% agree. I actually tried to trade for him in fantasy in a couple of leagues and has not been it. And I see Liftoff. Yeah, well, first of all, Laura, yes, Mark, I don't know what the deal is with him in terms of his injury, if he's just kind of working back from that and what his deal is with that. But, man, it's uncharacteristic, really, for Mark to have that. So, Laura, appreciate you checking in. But Liftoff saying really mad at these challenge flags and no timeouts, not winning like this. They couldn't. They needed a timeout in the worst way. If that happens, the Ravens got the ball back with 27 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. They could have had 1:07 to go down and win that game, to go down and tie that game. But you have to run 40 seconds off that clock because they have no timeout. So instead of 1:07, you have 27 seconds to go the length of the field. And Justin Tucker, man, it's tough. Obviously, we've been very spoiled in the Justin Tucker era, right? A lot of incredible memories. And I'm not saying Justin Tucker's done, so please don't take it that way. But if we look at the pure box score stats and dating back to last year, Justin Tucker is 1 of 7 on 50-plus yard field goals. He's 0 for 2 this season. So it's just everything. Everything. I know if Tuck's going to be beating up on himself for missing that. It could have been tied going into overtime, but there are so many more underlying issues. It can be philosophy-wise. I'm not impressed with Todd Monken so far. The Ravens defense, this was a team, again, I'm not putting any of this on Zach Orr. I'm not. I know the defense let up some plays in big situations. But, again, you hold the Raiders to 1.6. This is exactly what I said. Hey, what's a good way to get the Raiders into negative game flow and get it on your side defensively? Eliminate the run. Make the Raiders one-dimensional. They did exactly that. I thought the defensive line was awesome. Shout out Odafe Owe. Shout out Kyle Van Noy with a fractured orbital bone going out there and having 2 sacks. Travis Jones was a beast. Nnamdi Madubuike was a beast. Michael Pierce made plays. Man, everybody on the defensive line did well. But you can't get the job done. You can't get the job done against a Raiders team that is far worse. And Ronnie Stanley saying a couple minutes ago, this just felt more self-inflicted. Mark Andrews, at the end of the day, we all got to be better, period. This team knows inexcusable loss to Las Vegas in week 2. And now you look ahead and you're staring the Cowboys right in the face. You're staring the Bills right in the face. And you're staring a division rival in Cincinnati right in the face over these next 3 weeks. Something has to change and fast. If you start 0-3, the conversations get a lot more real. Not that they're not real right now, but they get a lot more real. I'm talking about a potential 0-3 start. Now, the Cowboys got beat up on by New Orleans today, and that defense did not look good. The Ravens are going to come in angry to Dallas in week 3. But you know what? The Cowboys, they're going to be mad themselves after what happened to them. And this is exactly it, Lucas. Thank you for this. I appreciate everybody who's putting stats for me. Again, I'm moving a million miles a minute trying to figure all this out and going live and everything. I love it. It's a grind, but appreciate everybody who's putting stats in here for me. Defense held Raiders to 50 yards in the first half. 50 yards in the first half. 9-6 game, all field goals. You know, that's enough. That's enough to win the game. You should. You hold the Raiders to 4-12 on third down, 30% on third down, 0-1 on fourth down. Obviously, the Raiders went deep on that play, and Brandon Stevens and Devontae Adams were in that one. But the Ravens go 3 of 11 on third down. The Ravens were worse on third down. You know, you can't have that. The Ravens, 11 penalties for 109 yards in this game. The Raiders, 3 for 15. I mean, look, regardless of how many of those plays you thought were terrible calls, and I thought a lot of them were, not everyone, but a lot of them, the Raiders didn't make mistakes. They didn't put penalties on their side of things. It was 3 5-yard penalties for the Raiders. And the Ravens averaged about 10 yards per penalty, 11 penalties for them. So the Ravens, I mean, look, they averaged almost 2 more yards per play than the Raiders did. They had over 100 more total yards than the Raiders did. All of this, you look at the box score, and you think the Ravens win this game by 10 points. But game management, over and over and over again, they continuously have these self-inflicted mistakes, like Ronnie Stanley said, and that, to me, has to be the most disappointing part of this entire thing. Because a 1-1 start was easily there for the taking. It's an inferior opponent. But that's just kind of what I expect at this point. Kind of makes me a little scared when the Ravens play an inferior opponent like that, where, you know, the bright lights aren't there. And the matchup is like, oh, you kind of expect, like, again, I'll take it. I said I'd be floored if the Ravens lost this game. It would take a lot. Well, guess what? A lot happened. Season's not over. They're not a guarantee to miss the playoffs. But again, I'll mention it again. Only one team last season made the playoffs, starting 0-2, and that was the Houston Texans. Could it be the Baltimore Ravens this year? Sure. They're too talented not to at least compete for a spot. But when stuff like this continues to hold you back, talent kind of gets thrown out the window. When you mismanage your offensive line as badly as they have, when you mismanage the game as badly as you do, you lose games like this. And you're playing a lot better opponents the next 3 weeks. So you got to tighten up. Lucas asks, what has to happen for you to completely give up on John? I mean, 0-5 start would certainly get me there. And look, to me, I have said this, if you've been listening to me, my opinion on John Harbaugh is they weren't going to fire him after the AFC Championship game because they made progress in the playoffs. But the Mike McDonald succession plan was one that was just, it was too good. It was too good. And it seems like they might have just missed it by a year. They might have just missed it by a year. They're going to have to figure out who their next guy is. But you can't keep, I mean, look, the blame has to be put. You can't make excuses here. And I'm not one that does, but you can't make excuses here. 1-4 would get me pretty close. That would be pretty close. I mean, if it's a good win against a good team, then they drop 2 close ones. That's where 1-4, I'd say, But look, we have to be honest here, right? We have to be honest. Every year you waste of Lamar Jackson's prime is a year that's gone. You can't get it back. You can't get it back. And good things come to an end. John Harbaugh's Ravens tenure has been a pretty big success. I think, to me, he's still one of the better coaches in the league. And you have teams lining up out the door probably to go get him as their guy. But guess what? Good things come to an end. And sometimes, look, this Ravens organization is loyal sometimes to too much of a fault. And I'd rather have an organization who is that instead of, not. I think it reflects better on them and gets more guys in here. But if this continues to happen, you can look at the Ravens' philosophy building their offensive line. You can look at the Ravens and these miscommunications. It can't happen. Lamar deserves better. The fan base deserves better. If you start 0-3, I see Mario talking about it here. 0-3 is a rough hole to recover from. I don't even know the stat. I'll have to look it up. I don't know the stats on that personally. I'll have to look it up. Season would be in dire jeopardy if that happened, though. It's tough to recover from that. Especially, look, the Ravens are playing a first-place schedule. Sure, they have some let-ups early on, but it's not like they just, after week 5 of the season, they have no tough teams to play. It's false. So it's disappointing. John Harbaugh's seat certainly heating up. And if they continue to struggle, something has to change. Something already has to change, right? Something has to change already. So a really tough loss, disappointing, disgusting, embarrassing, whatever you want to say, inexcusable. We're going to be back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens, continuing to look this team straight in the mirror, have a real conversation. Not that this one wasn't real. This was definitely real. But we're going to have a realistic, hard conversation about this Baltimore Ravens team tomorrow. So 6 a.m. Eastern time, be there. Make sure you're tuned in to Locked On Ravens. Again, we give you 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage, so be sure to like, subscribe on YouTube, follow along in audio form, turn notifications on so you can catch our post-game lives. We go live after every single Ravens game. We have bonus episodes. We do game day episodes now, getting you pumped up for the game. So plenty to dive into over the course of this week is the Ravens just, again, cannot – they keep tripping over their own 2 feet. So coming up tomorrow, back here, talking about the Ravens and continuing to dive into their disappointing start to the year. Stay tuned. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. See you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.